The city of Vancouver boasts that it's one of the richest cities in North America. Downtown is studded with cranes building multi-million-dollar condos. Vancouver is the site of the upcoming Winter Olympics and is repeatedly voted most livable city in the world. But visit this part of town, the Dickensian underside of the city, the so-called downtown east side, and it's a different story. This is the single poorest neighborhood in Canada, one of the roughest areas in all of North America. 1 in 3 residents here is HIV positive. The rate of hepatitis C is 70%, putting Vancouver on par with Botswana when it comes to infection rates. Tourists who take a wrong turn off the cobblestone downtown streets are likely to find used syringes laying on the sidewalks, streets lined with homeless people, prostitutes making their rounds, and junkies shooting up in broad daylight. So Vancouver has enacted a controversial scheme. An experiment is going on in the downtown east side, an experiment in which drug addicts are not only allowed but encouraged to shoot up in the safety of a government-sponsored clinic. It's part of a broad plan called harm reduction, reducing the harm caused by the likes of prostitution and drug abuse by bringing these illicit activities into the system. The idea is to stop the spread of disease, to stall the urban AIDS crisis here, and to show that drug addiction is a disease that needs to be treated medically, not criminalized. Will the plan work? That's what we came here to find out. Now, where are we here? This is Hastings
right here.
And
this is Hastings in Columbia, and probably this corner here is really quite the corner.
Dean Wilson is an addict who has been living in the downtown east side for more than 20 years. He says the evidence of desperate conditions is all over this neighborhood.
This is a rig that's been thrown away by somebody. I can't walk away and just leave that there, so I picked them up very carefully.
There are 7,000 addicts, many of them homeless, in this 10-block area alone.
That is everything I own in the world right now. It's right in that pile.
These alleys have taken their toll. There's literally thousands of people have died of overdose. I bet you there's a couple hundred who died in this alley alone.
This is a sight rarely seen so out in the open on the streets of most major cities in North America. But here in Vancouver's downtown east side, this takes place literally hundreds of times a day.
No.
It's gotten so bad down here, Vancouver's urban crisis has come to the attention of the United Nations.
Vancouver is considered the world's most livable city, but my question is, for whom?
Patricia Lytle was among the authors of a recent UN Population Fund report which warned that high urbanization levels in fast-growing cities as varied as wealthy Vancouver and the AIDS-ravaged African nation of Botswana can lead to extremely high HIV prevalence.
you said that this particular area reminded you of Botswana. Comparing it with Botswana raised a lot of people's eyebrows, to say the least.
The downtown east side has an HIV rate that is the same as Botswana's.
Is that true?
Yes. It's got the most concentrated epidemic in the Western Hemisphere of HIV, and possibly in the industrialized world.
How did it get this way? Vancouver, about 150 miles north of Seattle, is a port city, an entry point for drugs. It's also the only major Canadian city that has a mild winter, so it attracts homeless addicts from around the country, many of whom share needles and other drug paraphernalia, passing on viruses like HIV and hepatitis.
Tell me why, if you think they should, anyone living in Dubuque or Des Moines or Dallas should care about what's happening in downtown east side Vancouver.
This could happen in any city in the world. I think what's interesting about Vancouver is that it is such a wealthy city and such a wealthy country. If we can't deal with this problem, then who can?
The way Vancouver has chosen to deal with the problem is not through the traditional means of tougher law enforcement. but by actually allowing IV drug users to shoot up in the comfort and safety of this government-sponsored clinic.
Prior to this being open, no matter where you looked on this block, there was open injection everywhere. Yeah, I mean, literally, the bus stops, every...
Let's go inside and have a look around.
Oh, welcome to Insight, Dan.
Insight, the supervised injection site, is the only place of its kind in North America. In these 12 booths, addicts are provided with everything they need to inject heroin or cocaine in a safe manner.
So you get a fresh needle.
Without sharing needles.
Fresh water.
Fresh water.
And spreading viruses.
All right, well, show me what happens here.
Okay, well, typically I'd have my drugs and I would tie myself up. You would find your vein, bango.
Nurses can watch the whole process in the mirrors to make sure it's done safely.
And it's all over.
700 IV drug users come through this facility every day.
Something like this is helping my life, because without this, I'd be in the alley shooting behind some dumpster. And being criminalized, this isn't social drug use. Nobody wants to be here, Dan. This, as you've seen out in the streets, to say this is not a party. It's just
And
horrible.
you're saying it's not a party.
It's not a party. This isn't like on a Friday night having a couple of beers and smoking a joint.
Practical question. From where do the drugs come? Do you buy them on the street? Are they supplied here?
No, we buy them on the street. We still have to go through that black market.
Let me bounce some things by you. The people watching and listening to this, that I strongly suspect at least some of them will have these questions. Why is one not to think that this is, quote, coddling?
The thing is, dead people don't detox. We've got to keep them alive long enough for them to make the decision to get out. And this will keep them alive long enough to get that strategy in place.
And you think it works?
Damn right it does.
The evidence, proponents of Insight say, is upstairs.
What's here?
Well, this is our detox. People from Insight just present.
Down below.
Down below. If they're ready for a break or want to look at detoxing, they just ask. If we've got a space available, we'll be able to let them up on the same day.
Sarah Evans, the coordinator of Insight, says anyone using the safe injection site can ask for a bed in the co-ed detox upstairs and can stay there up to 1 month.
Okay, yeah, this is Sonia.
Thank you so much for helping us this morning.
Hi, I'm Jackie.
Hello. Tell me what brought you here.
I used to use downstairs at Insight, and I got to the point where I didn't want to live anymore. I really didn't, and I do. Deep down inside, I want to live. I want a life.
Now tell me your story. What brought you to that point that you said, listen, I need help and I'm going to get it?
Just sick of like being on the street and like hurting my family and like hurting myself. Like this, it's crazy. It's nuts.
Gotta be dangerous on the street.
It's very dangerous.
Well, you're 47. This young lady is in her early 20s. You talk much together?
Oh yeah, we spend time together.
What do you tell her?
We talk about recovery, you know, and if we need a hug, we give hugs to each other, and they're free.
Well, I would think living in a tough neighborhood, living the life you've lived, that you might be past the hug stage. What you're telling me is you never get past the hug stage.
No, I still love to give hugs.
Well, let's have a hug then. Huh?
Not a problem.
Right, not a problem. That's me to you.
Supporters of Insight say this is the ultimate harm reduction, getting addicts to this stage of recovery. But for doctors like Julio Montana, one of the world's leading AIDS researchers, it started with a simple dilemma, an AIDS crisis out of control in Vancouver's downtown east side.
I think it's important to understand why an HIV researcher all of a sudden has developed an interest on this particular subject matter. Imagine that in the year 2003, 50% of the people that died with HIV in this city had never accessed treatment for HIV, which, by the way, in Canada is free. So we needed to do something to begin to access these difficult populations.
And Insight was a result of this.
Exactly.
The idea came from similar safe injection sites in Germany, which led to a decline in heroin deaths there.
It's not time for inaction, it's time for action.
Dean and other drug users lobbied City Hall for the right to start a similar center in Vancouver. The Liberal Canadian government at the time in Ottawa eventually agreed to try the experiment and offered Vancouver an exemption to the country's drug laws. And the experiment at least seems to be working. 24 peer-reviewed articles have been written about the effectiveness of the facility to reduce syringe sharing among HIV-positive addicts, stop overdose fatalities, and increase the rate of detox by 30%. Inspired by this apparent success in Canada, the city of San Francisco has begun discussing opening a safe injection site of their own, and this past October invited folks from Insight down to share what they've learned.
There's no sharing of drugs permitted on the premises, no dealing, and there's also self-injection only.
Thank you so much.
For someone who comes to me after this broadcast says, well, if San Francisco wants to get, quote, soft on drugs, they'll pay a heavy price for that. You can't afford to be soft on drugs. You would say what to that person?
This is not about being soft on drugs. This is about being practical, dealing with a public health epidemic in our midst and, in fact, on global terms, and trying to find solutions to real problems that can be applied here and today. And let me just say very clearly that I'm a father of 4 children, ages 17 to 21, and I don't promote drug use, I don't like drug use, I don't encourage drug use, and I want to stop drug use. But the way to stop it is not to forbid them, is to educate people and to work with those that are addicted so that they can move on to a better standard of living.
Not everyone agrees with that sentiment. Back when Insight opened in 2003, the American drug czar, John Walters, called it, quote, state-sponsored suicide. And even some of the frontline officers who walk the beat in the downtown East Side had their doubts about the clinic. Constable Shane Atkin has been working this part of town for more than a decade, and he says he hasn't seen much progress since Insight opened.
I've seen no change in the number of people who inject drugs in public, and the proof is here. And it's here every day. And the ironic part of it is the fact that the supervised injection site is just on the other side of this building.
But at this point, Insight is just a pilot project and only serves a fraction of the thousands of addicts here. The rest are still on the streets.
Why can't you do this in the privacy of your own home? Think we'd be busting your ass?
You know, the traditional war on drugs approach, the traditional just tell them to clean up their act and make them get better, obviously hasn't worked.
Please rise for the mayor.
Vancouver Mayor Sam Sullivan, the first quadriplegic mayor of a major North American city, is a staunch supporter of the harm reduction approach to the drug problem. It's a philosophy that was endorsed by the Liberal federal government in Ottawa when Insight opened in 2003, but the new Conservative administration of Prime Minister Stephen Harper has denounced Insight for promoting the illegal drug trade and has threatened to shut it down.
Because if you remain a drug addict, I don't care how much harm we reduce, you're going to have a short and miserable life.
Your own Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, has said that Insight enables drug addicts. It encourages drug use.
Nobody wants to be a drug addict. I have talked to many people with drug addictions, and they all want to be healthy. They all want to be clean. I tell you, I do not want to be a quadriplegic. I would do anything to stand up. But that's not going to happen. That's not my life. So I need help managing my disability, just like those people with drug addictions need help managing their disability.
For now, the federal government in Ottawa has granted Insight a stay until July, but they refuse to speak with us about their official stance on the project. But in the meantime, Mayor Sullivan has plans to take Insight's harm reduction approach one step further with a radical new project called CAST, in which addicts would actually be supplied with legal pill forms of narcotics from pharmacies, not drug dealers.
We want to convert people who are illegal injection drug users to legal pill medicine users. We want to get them out of shoveling money into the pockets of criminals.
How is it supposed to work?
Well, we know that for heroin, for instance, if you can give them either heroin or an alternative, morphine, Dilaudid, OxyContin, these kinds of options. Heroin does not damage organs. It doesn't damage their brain or their livers.
Is this a scientific fact?
Very much so. People can have low-dose opiates and live full, productive lives. They get jobs, they are contributing citizens.
Well, I want to ask you about that. Mayor Sullivan is now pushing this CAST program, C-A-S-T.
It's great.
Do you think that'll work?
It's got to work. That's what I'm saying. Like, prescribe, please prescribe. Let me go to a pharmacy. Let me get my drugs. Let me go home. Let me live my life. And if I didn't have to spend my whole day, first of all, getting the money to get the drugs, then finding the right guy to get the drugs, then going home, geez, I might have time to go get a job.
Dean says that after 4 decades of being addicted to heroin, he's now in recovery on methadone, and credits Insight for him being alive today. But if Insight shuts down, he's not sure where he and addicts like him would be a year from now.
This is gold standard medicine. This works. And if they close this down, then my life is at stake.
Vancouver's drug-infested downtown east side may be the most dangerous for the hundreds of prostitutes who congregate in this part of town. Up next, how Vancouver is trying to apply harm reduction strategies to the oldest profession in the world.